coach, your UAB Blazers. Can you tell me about them and just expectations for this season?
Well, I love where I'm at. Forever I've been in football a long time, and the thing I've come to realize probably more in the last 10, 15 years than ever before is how important the people in your tribe are. And football is unique because it's more than player coach. And I think that's a mistake that's made a lot of times is it's this, bond of player and coach, but you forget with football right now, equipment, training room, strength and conditioning, marketing, PR, donor relations, call it development, they all affect us. So the relationships, let's take that 160, which is in my building, but let's extend that another 50 to 70. So now you're looking at, let's say 225 to 250 people are kind of in this football tribe, and those relationships are really important. And I love the relationships we've made since December 1st. It's been hard, your attrition, turnover, earning people's trust, breaking people's trust, re-earning it, new ways of doing things. But I'm super pleased by the relationships that have been made. I think that gives us a really good chance to have an epic journey. And epic doesn't always end with a trophy, right? Now, we hope it does. That's our goal. We probably all have similar goals here. But really, when you just say, I put together a framework where we have the potential to go on this, I always use the climbing analogy, right? If you're at the bottom of Mount Everest, you look at the top and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't. There's no way I can do this. Well, I'm going to start stepping, right? So we're going to start stepping. We're going to start climbing. And I know, my years in football know that we've created a framework where as we keep climbing, as we keep stepping, there's going to be a lot of challenges, there's going to be a lot of victories, there's going to be a lot of stuff that happens. We're going to be well prepared to handle that stuff. Therefore, we finish strong, it's going to be epic. I don't know what that looks like win-loss. I know what I hope it is. But I also know that, the relational equity that will be built up on that climb is really what football is about. And that's what gets lost, I think, is that's really what the climb of a season is the relational equity that gets built up through going on this massive climb together. I'm a Miley Cyrus fan because I have 3 daughters, and that song, The Climb, I remember when the girls would sing in the car, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a great football metaphor. It really is. She's a psycho, but that song is amazing as it relates to what we're about to do in football.
And Coach, what have you learned most about yourself transitioning to becoming a coach, I guess from player, analyst to coach?
Yeah, the biggest transition when I went from analyst / retired to then coach was I changed. I was not a very good connector for years. I was distant. I was kind of surface level with my relationships. And I had to get messy in my relationships. I had to get messy with parents, with, 8th graders that were going through issues, with sophomores, with, young coaches. High school to put together the staff I had to put together, I had to get a lot of really young coaches. So guys that really hadn't coached. So I had to get messy with their development, teach them how to coach and connect. So it changed me for the better. I'm a much better man now than I was pre-coaching because it's taught me a relational skill that I really lacked. So that's been the biggest transition. It's been the best thing that I do. It's kind of turned, it's funny how God does things. He takes a weakness and turns it into a strength. Something I wasn't very good at, I think I'm pretty good at now because he's changed me. So that's kind of been the coolest thing about my coaching journey is seeing the change it's made in me.
And Coach, I'm curious. Are we seeing between yourself and Deion Sanders? I feel like you guys have almost a similar path between, player, retired, analyst, coach. Are we seeing possibly more? Do you think you guys are more or less trend-setting from the perspective of? Are we going to see more high-profile NFL players in college football?
So I think So Prime and I are very different. He was a much better player than me, obviously. He's way more charismatic than me. But I worked with Prime and NFL Network, and I always admired this about Prime, and still do to this day. As gifted as he was a thinker. He was a high football IQ guy. He saw the game three-dimensionally. He didn't see it as me versus you, even though he sat out there on that island a lot of times. And I think I'm guessing this, you can ask him this question, I think it's when he hurt his toe. You know, Deion went from the greatest athlete that's ever played the game, him and Bo Jackson, to a cripple that had to play at a very high level. So he had to learn other ways. And I think that's his gift as a coach, is he doesn't only speak to the elite athlete. He speaks to the guy that has challenges and knows how to coach him. I'm a huge fan of Prime. But I think it's unfair to both of us to compare us because of the obvious, what you just stated, because I think we do it a little differently, right? Not better or worse, good, bad, just differently. What I do think you'll see as a trend is the NFL player that was a coach by nature, right? Yes, he was a player. I'll give a great one. Jets quarterback. Randy Moss's quarterback at Marshall. Chad Pennington. Yeah. So Chad's one of the great teachers of football. Chad's made plenty of money, lives in Kentucky, doesn't need to coach. But you're seeing him coach. I could see him taking the next step. Jason Witten, same thing. Jason, although a very good player, was always a craftsman at what he does. He's doing it in high school. You're going to see him do it. Ty Detmer, you'll see that happen. There's a lot of those types of guys that I think we're breaking the glass ceiling for. So yes, I do think you'll see that as a trend. I think the other trend I'm hoping to help is I think you're going to see the high school coach that runs a very sophisticated program. So Ohio, Texas, Southern California, there's pockets around the country where these high school programs were like ours in Tennessee, that they're basically FCS programs. I would say their budgets and very similar. Like I had a lot of FCS coaches come in and say, well, you do this better than us. So they're kind of I would view some of these high school programs as like FCS level coaching, and you're going to see those guys get elevated to Group of 5 jobs, Power 5 jobs, because they have experience managing a lot of people, a lot of situations, coaching at a high level. So I think both those trends here in the next 5 to 10 years, I do think you'll see more of that.
Hey, Coach, I wanted to ask you, too, about another one of those guys who kind of Baltimore Ravens royalty as well, Ed Reed. Do you think he's one of those guys that could do it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Ed was, again, so I played against Ed when I was at the Niners, and he was kind of towards the end of his career, and he had lost a couple steps, but it didn't make him worse. Like, I'd be the first to tell you, I played against him when he was the best, and I played against him when he was not nearly the athlete he came in as, but he was just as good. So again, you have to take more of a thinking man, craftsman approach to the game, because that's what coaching is, right? Because those of us that played at the highest level had elite traits, like elite, not like 5-star, like elite traits. It's very hard to expect your players to have that. Like, I would tell Jacob this if he was here. Jacob's not as talented as I was at this age. He can be better than me, though. But there's avenues to be better that aren't talent avenues. And I think we as coaches have to help kids reach their potential through different avenues if they don't have elite traits, right? So Jackson's behind me. Jackson does have elite size, height, weight, inside backer. But he hasn't played an elite level yet. So we need to help him through our experience understand what those avenues are to get the most out of his athleticism, the most out of his traits. I think you have to do it from a thinking man's approach, not as a, hey, I could do that, why can't you do it? run faster. What if I told Jackson, hey, just hit him harder, run faster? He's like, what the hell are you talking about? I just ran as fast as I could and hit him as hard as I could. I don't have any more, right? Well, that's how some coaches speak. But if I can give them tools to like say, hey, just check out the depth of the tailback and the offside guard's hand placement. You tie those two things together, you're a half step ahead of this gap scheme that's coming. Well, now he's already really talented, and he's got a head start on what's coming. Now he can play at elite level. That's what Ed Reed had to do after he lost a couple steps. That's what Deion had to do after he lost a couple steps. So I think that's the gift of the elite athlete turned to coach, but had to go coach going from an elite athlete to an average athlete at some point, but still maintaining a high level of play. Like when I played in Baltimore, I was a shell of what I was my years in Tampa because of injuries. So I had to find a new way of completing the ball, of moving in the pocket to winning games. So I lean on those experiences to coach more than, oh man, just rip that corner out in there, double cheek that sucker and beat the safety. If I said that to Jake, he'd be like, Coach, I can't throw it any harder. How am I going to throw it harder than my hardest? Well, I can teach him how to anticipate it. I can teach him how to look that safety off. I can teach him how to use his eyes differently, his feet differently, because I had to do that when I was in Baltimore.
Coach, I'm just curious as well. The AAC, college football as a whole, a lot of chaos and realignment and things like that. But this conference, getting these new squads, you guys being one of them, what do you make of everything just going on in college football and just the landscape of this conference?
I love this conference. I won't speak to the whole landscape of conference realignment because I don't know anything about it. I don't know. I'm not in the inner meetings, right?
That's like pretty new. It's like a lot of people.
It's funny, as a high school coach, with kids that are being highly recruited, you learn to admire certain programs. It's funny how Tulane was one of the programs that we as high school coaches really admire. Like, holy crap, Willie is as good as anybody. Jeff, UTSA, we're like, wow, that's a program that does as good as anybody. Ryan down at Memphis, because we were in Nashville. Like, we pushed kids to Memphis. So it's funny how 3, 4, 5 of these programs that we admired from a high school standpoint are now in our conference. It speaks to the gravitas of this conference. I don't want to get into the, we're as good as this, are we a power six? I don't know, because it's my first year. I know that from the high school perspective, that's the lens I'm looking at it through. The schools in this conference we felt were as close to, if not equal, with many of the Power 5 schools.
Coach, and I guess I'm going to let you go on this one. Take you down memory lane a little bit. You mentioned your Ravens. Do you have a favorite memory of the Ravens? I'm assuming it's the Super Bowl. Is there any moments you could share?
My favorite moment was I made one of the worst mistakes I'd ever made in my career. We were playing the Titans in Week 11, and they had never lost in their stadium. And we have the game won. We're going down to kick a field goal that's going to put it away. We already have the game won. We're either going to kneel on it. We're not going to kneel on it, but we're either going to put them in a very long yardage situation to go down and beat us, or we were going to kick a field goal and make it a 2-score game. And I panicked and made a terrible read and threw a pick six that lost us the game. And I'm walking off the sidelines to the boos and this and that, and Shannon Sharpe and Ray Lewis come up to me on the sideline and said, what a great opportunity to go win it now. And it flipped my entire perspective on setbacks. Like that, and I've told Shannon and Ray this, and I don't even think they know what they were saying. They were probably just saying it so I wouldn't go in the tank. But it's changed how I coach. It's changed how I thought, and it changed how I played. Was that you don't want to have those setbacks, but in football they're inevitably going to happen. It's not the setback; it's how you handle the setback. It's how you reset. I use my phone as an analogy a lot. I'm like, if I put on this clock app and I put stopwatch, well, every football play is around 8 seconds. Okay, it's 6.5 to 9 seconds. So let's call it 8 seconds. So something just happened in that 8.35. Good, bad, indifferent. The greats do this.
I'm curious.
They press one simple button.
How do you, leaving a place like Alabama, how do you...
That's greatness right there.
Know that you have
You want to know what greatness is? That's greatness. Learn how to press the reset button.
How do you kind of get to the point where
So
you have to explore earlier on?
they did that, and I reset, and it changed my life forever. And I took us on this epic drive, and I threw a game-winning touchdown, beat the Titans for the first time we'd ever beaten them. And it taught me, and I try to teach the players, coaches, my daughters, everybody this, that life hits you in the groin a lot. It's happened to everybody at this table. What defines us is, can we press reset? And I learned it on that particular play, and I've carried it over to everything I've done since. And I think teaching that simple lesson to your players is one of the great gifts you can give them in life, not just football, but in life. I had a young man sit with me 2 weeks on the job. He's had a massive tragedy happen in his household. The guy doesn't know me from Adam. I've only been his coach for 2 weeks. But I had told him, anytime you go through anything, you come up to my open door, come up to my office. So he's in my office crying. This is what's happened. This is a grown man now. Devastated. To be able to have this conversation with him about reset. Now, be empathetic for what he's going through and walk him through what he's going through. But, like, he is now the player on our team that something's happening in a practice environment or something that says, guys, we got to reset. And that mantra is something that I think there's power in that. There's magic in that as a man, as a human, not just as a football player.
Coach, I can talk to you all day about football, but I'm going to let these other guys get to it. I really appreciate your time. Best of luck this season.
Of course. Thank you.